So women like me who were primary breadwinners did not have the same support at home as my male colleagues who were the breadwinner. And in the data, you actually see that women who are the primary breadwinner still do twice as much cooking and cleaning as their lower earning male partners. And that just doesn't add up. And then when you add to that the fact that, again, I didn't know until you look at the data that moms spend twice as much time with their kids as moms a generation ago because of our greater understanding of child development, because we understand that holding our babies and breastfeeding and baby wearing and talking to our toddlers and doing homework with our grade schoolers, that these things are crucial. They require our time.
Welcome to The Ripple Effect, the podcast that takes you on a journey through the minds of Wharton faculty. I'm your host, Dan Loney, and in each episode, we'll be diving deep into the inspiration behind the groundbreaking research that Wharton professors have conducted and exploring how their findings resonate with the world today.
The old line, having it all, is one that tends to be associated with women and their careers and what they look to try and find in those careers. Like, can they bring children in the world while still advancing a professional life? Corinne Low is an associate professor of business economics and public policy here at the Wharton School. She has authored a new book about the topic titled Having It All, What Data Tells Us About Women's Lives and Getting the Most Out of Yours. And she joins us here in studio. Hi, Corinne. How are you?
Hi, Dan. It's great to be back.
I guess let's start with the title itself, because that's always the big question, is where we are now. Can women have it all?
Well, what I document in the book is that actually having it all, quote unquote, has become harder than ever because women's time, and especially the time of working moms, is being uniquely squeezed in this moment. Our careers are more demanding than ever. Men have not stepped up to perform household duties at home. We'll get into that data more. And we do twice as much childcare. We spend twice as much time with our kids as parents a generation ago. And so all of those things kind of don't add up to 24 hours in the day. And so I think if we try to have it all according to these old models, these old beliefs, without recognizing the way that these structural forces have changed, then we're setting ourselves up for unhappiness.
So is having it all a reasonable expectation?
I think what I say in the book is that it is possible for women to have what they need to have a happy and fulfilled life, but they're going to have to choose what their all is. And absolutely, if you want to have that career where you're going to be the equal to a man and equal to your male colleagues, and it's going to move at the same pace, absolutely you can have that. And absolutely, if you want to be the mom who never misses a soccer game and makes the homemade baby food and the hand-decorated birthday cupcakes, absolutely you can be that. But those might be two separate full-time jobs. And so if you try to do both of those things, to a level of excellence where there's never going to be a dropped ball, there's never going to be a tough day, you will end up feeling the way I was feeling at the beginning of the book, which is exhausted, depleted, and wondering, is this it?
What does the data tell us about the path of trying to have it all right now?
So as I said, there's two big forces that when I looked at the data, it kind of was an aha moment for me, because I was wondering, when I was at Wharton early in my career and I was commuting from New York City and I had just had a baby. And as I say in the book, I say in 2017, I gave birth to my son and also a midlife crisis because I was commuting 2.5 hours. I was the primary breadwinner, became the sole breadwinner. And I just felt like it was so hard every single day for me to show up the way I wanted to show up, both at work and at home. And I felt like my male colleagues seemed to be publishing papers faster than me, and my female friends seemed to be doing a better job, with their kids, or, be able to do more. And then I started looking at the data, and I found that it was not just me at all, that we were being set up to fail, because as women had been able to take on the same roles as men in the workplace, as gender roles had converged at work, they hadn't converged at home. So women like me who were primary breadwinners did not have the same support at home as my male colleagues who were the breadwinner. And in the data, you actually see that women who are the primary breadwinner still do twice as much cooking and cleaning as their lower earning male partners. And that just doesn't add up. And then when you add to that the fact that, again, I didn't know until you look at the data that moms spend twice as much time with their kids as
Sure.
moms a generation ago because of our greater understanding of child development, because we
Right.
understand that holding our babies and breastfeeding and baby wearing and talking to our toddlers and doing homework with our grade schoolers, that these things are crucial. They require our time.
Yeah. So as you kind of laid out a moment ago, then the relationship also between husband and wife, partner and partner, to have a great working relationship so that the wife can have it all becomes that much more important. Everybody doing their share so that everybody can be successful along the way.
I mean, I think that's absolutely it. When I look in the data, I see that when a man has a high paying career, it almost becomes like a joint project of the household, right? It's something that the whole household is organized to kind of support, because that is the income that then is, supporting the lifestyle for that household. And I don't see that reciprocity with women's careers, that when she has a really high paying job and even much higher paying than his job, I don't see his time in the household change to actually support her.
Why do you think that is?
I do think that gender roles have something to do with it. And I think that's one of the big things that we have to tackle to start making some change, is that I think it's hard to see, men have kind of been trained to say, okay, your ambition, your career, that's what matters. And it's hard to let go of that ideal and to say, oh, maybe the way that I can really be a great provider and a great supporter is by leaning into my wife's career and making sure that she's able to get the work hours that she needs. And so, like, in the data, I see some couples where the wife is earning 4 times as much and she still gets fewer hours to work than he does. So he's earning a quarter of the amount and he gets more hours to work and is doing much less of the home duties.
What has the corporate world done then? I mean, they have made some changes in terms of the availability of time off when you have a child, but it still feels like, obviously, from a lot of people's perspectives, that there is still a ways to go, that from the business perspective, they can do more to open the door for women to make sure that they can try to have it all.
Well, I think not only can they do more, but I think the firms that manage to figure this out are going to have a major competitive advantage, because that's talent that you're retaining. And talent is ideas, it's innovation, and it's what's going to actually, push you ahead of your competitors in this, race that we're all in, right? So I think that firms must figure this out. And I don't think it's as hard as they think, because another thing that's true is when I look at the data, this period in life where our time is most constrained, I actually call it the squeeze. It's temporary. It's the time when our kids are young and we're making career investments, but because those investments haven't paid off yet, we can't throw money at the problem.
Right.
And that period comes and it goes. And if firms can figure out how to retain women through that period, then all of the investments they made in recruiting and acquiring and training that talent, they're going to get to hold on to through a very long, productive life of this worker, right?
Right.
So what do firms need to do? And I think here I'd like to do some myth busting, because a lot of firms are talking about right now that they want return to office and that they think that's better for productivity. And I think they're worried. They're saying, well, we can't give women the flexibility and the work from home that they want. But that's not actually what the research shows that women want. So in research that has offered women different types of roles, either the standard kind of 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, or work from home, flexible hours, they find that women are willing to give up very little pay for those flexible or work from home options. But instead, if they offer women a schedule where the employer sets it, it's called employer discretion. So, this time you're working, 6 to noon, but tomorrow you have to be here until 9 p.m.
Sure.
They're willing to give up almost 40% of their pay to avoid that schedule. What this tells me is that women don't want flexibility, they want boundaries.
Okay.
And I think it's actually possible for firms to offer them. So yes, you can get everybody back into the office if you're able to say, hey, let's use this remote technology that we really perfected during the pandemic to say in-person work ends at 5 p.m., go home, pick up your kids from daycare, have dinner as a family, and then after bedtime, that's when we're going to have our next call. That's when we're going to log back on, right? Recognize what women are telling you about what hours are the most costly and figure out a way to put those boundaries in place.
Well, and partly, I guess, that's made easier to be able to do that because of the technology that we all have at our fingertips. I mean, none of us go too far from our smartphones to begin with. So we're constantly in this kind of connection phase. And that's another kind of component of work in general about how people talk about, we don't get as much break in general.
Yes, exactly. And so rather than saying, firms are saying, hey, it's costly for us to have everybody working from home all the time. We need some of that in-person interaction. Great. Get it done between 9 to 5. And I promise you, you are going to retain not just more female employees, but more employees in general, because that old trope of the employee that you built this system for, that's a man with a stay-at-home wife, that's fewer and fewer of your employees in general.
Yeah.
So it's not just female employees who are responsible for care work and who have kids that they need to pick up from daycare.
You have spent some time in the book talking about the decision-making process that women go through in terms of making these calls on a variety of different areas so that they can have the best of all worlds here and the challenges that really, in many cases, get put forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I encourage people to think about their happiness like an economist. And so, economists think about individuals as maximizing their utility function. What's your utility function? Well, it's not quite happiness because it's this deeper meaning, contentment, joy, and fulfillment over a lifetime versus kind of momentary happiness. And when you use that as your North Star, that's going to enable you to respond to these impossible time constraints by radically prioritizing what actually contributes to your happiness, the thing that actually gives you a marginal benefit for that marginal time you're putting in versus the things that we're doing from guilt, obligation, a sense that somebody on social media or my friend is doing it, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to figure out that if we want to be able to have the careers that we want to have, and if we want to be able to be the parents that we want to be, that's enough. We have to say no to everything else, and we got to declutter our time.
So that brings me into something else you talk about, and you talk about ROI in the scope of this process. We talk about return on investment so much in the business landscape. It feels like we don't talk about it enough, of looking at all that kind of is impacted in our personal lives, and are we truly getting the best ROI in our personal side as well as our professional?
Absolutely. Just one example that I think, some people, women especially, don't think about enough is when we go through this guilt of like, oh, should I outsource this? Really, I should be able to do it myself. I want us to reframe that decision to say not outsourcing a task is choosing to hire yourself to do it. Are you going to get a higher return on your time from doing this household task in-house versus the other uses of your time? And that might be investing in your career, or it also might just be refilling your cup, replenishing, sleeping, which we also need to be productive, right? And I think with male-coded tasks, we don't struggle with that same guilt-laden trade-off. We say like, hey, of course, the plumber can fix this problem, or the roofer or the car repairman can fix this problem faster than he can do it. And we recognize that kind of a man's time is valuable because it can be spent in the workforce. But with female-coded tasks, we almost go in with the assumption that she should be able to juggle both. And that's unfair. It's not the reality, and it's inefficient.
Should companies obviously are bringing forward a little bit more to the table in a lot of these areas. Can there be, or should there be, a middle ground where both the employee and the employer can kind of meet in that, where the employee is getting the benefit, but also the employer is getting the benefit, and both sides feel like it is a great relationship. It just works for both sides.
I absolutely think the win-win solution is there because, as I said, women are bringing their innovation to the table, they're bringing their talent to the table, and you can, if you figure out how to do this as a firm, retain a woman for, the 25 years after her kids are in full-time school, where you don't know where she's going to be able to go to in the company. And so I think firms make a grave mistake by losing talent during this temporary period, during this squeeze that they could hold on to. And again, I think it's a little cheaper than they think to hold on to it if we are evidence-driven.
How much has the pandemic kind of changed a lot of these dynamics? I say that because it seemed like before the pandemic, from the financial perspective, the amount that women were getting for certain jobs was improving. It certainly was not on par with where men were, but it seemed like it was improving a little bit. And it felt like the pandemic knocked that back a few steps as well.
Well, I think the pandemic put a lot of childcare burden on women, and women were the ones who were the shock absorber for that by and large. And the thing that is interesting is that was true whether they were the breadwinner or not. It wasn't based on their earning power. They were more likely to kind of take that on. But I think if you zoom out a little bit, actually the gender wage gap has been plateauing since around the 1990s. And that's around the same time that we saw this explosion in childcare time. And so I actually think if we zoom up out, it goes up and down, it gets better or worse. We have some deeper structural issues that we need to work on where we absolutely need more support for everybody, both moms and dads being parents. We need to recognize the fact that this has changed, that the inputs that we put into raising children is different. Every parent who's listening can probably recognize the elaborate bedtime routine and waiting for your kid to go to bed and processing the day's highs and lows. I grew up in the 1980s. My bedtime routine was go to bed. Okay.
Yes.
And when you
Yeah.
think about that, you actually
Yeah.
recognize how much time use has changed, that
Yeah.
the way we parent today is completely different. And knowing that data, it's empowering. It's empowering for workers and it's empowering for firms to think about, well, now how do we make that work?
A 5-minute go to bed process compared to what could be 45 minutes to an hour
Exactly.
at this point. Then is the expectation then, and you talked about men helping out this process as well. What do men need to do to help this process move forward for women?
Yeah, I'm going to write another book and I'm going to call it Lean In for Men because I think we focus so much on what women need to do to be competitive in the workplace. And we haven't focused on how men need to evolve. And I think the missing part of the gender revolution is, as I said, we've seen that convergence in roles at work. Women can take on the same roles. They can be as productive as men at work. We haven't seen that convergence at home. Men's time doing housework hasn't changed since 1975. It's entirely constant. And so for men to be competitive as part of this changing world, in a broader sense, not just on the labor market, but for them to be good partners, for them to get married, for them to stay married.
Yeah.
I think men need to be bringing more to the table than a paycheck.
What do you hope then that people will take from reading your book?
I hope that women will feel seen and validated. One of the things I say is it's not in your head, it's in the data. And so I hope that they will see that they are not failing. They are facing a kind of impossible set of circumstances. And then I hope that will give them permission to navigate it however brings them the most happiness and fulfillment, and to find what they need and pursue that, pursue their optimal, their utility function, not what success is that somebody else has defined for you. And I call that having it almost.
That's right. Corinne, great to see you again. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Dan.
Thank you. Corinne Low, the book is titled Having It All, What Data Tells Us About Women's Lives and Getting the Most Out of Yours. Corinne is an associate professor of business economics and public policy here at the Wharton School.
Thank you for listening to The Ripple Effect. We hope you found this episode informative and engaging. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review so that we can continue to bring you the best insight from the Wharton School.